Well, you all ready to make this happen? Your way up. So when you go full throttle, it pulls the TV cable. That worked out good. Here we see a side-by-side comparison of the 700R4 versus the Turbo 350. You'll note that the transmission on your left, the Turbo 350, is 3 1/8 inch, give or take a little shorter. What that means is you're going to have to shorten your drive shaft. Now the splines and stuff on the output are the same. Unless you've got a brand new output shaft, I would always recommend just buying a brand new output shaft that doesn't have any wear where that seal rides, so keep you from having a leak. They're relatively cheap, so other than that, this side especially, they look pretty similar. This side not quite as much. Turbo 350 is easy to recognize. It's got that one squared off corner. The other 3 corners are perfectly square. 700R4 is square on the back corners and a little rounded on the front side over here. But we'll go over through the major differences in these units. All right, let's have us a real quick talk about the 700R4 versus Turbo 350 transmission differences here. Turbo 350 is excellent all-around transmission performance or just street driving. 700R4 is as well. Now, the main reason for doing 700R4 swap, obviously, is to pick up your 4th gear overdrive, get better gas mileage, less wear on the engine. So, let's talk about the other differences that people don't understand and get themselves in trouble with on this transmission. Starting with the most critical component on it that is probably the leading cause of this thing's bad reputation, and that is the TV cable. Now on your Turbo 350, your kickdown cable is exactly that. You mash the gas, it pulls the cable up, it drops down a gear. Doesn't get any simpler than that. Your cable can be slightly out of adjustment, no big deal. 700R4 does not have a kickdown cable. They look the same, they go into the transmission on the same side. Even the linkage up top looks similar, especially in the 80s, you know. This has a TV cable. That changes the line pressure in the transmission, changes the firmness, the feel of the shift, if you will. This cable has to be perfectly adjusted or you smoke your transmission. You can kill a brand new transmission in 30 minutes or less. So when you're doing this swap, you have to buy the correct cable, you have to buy the correct bracket that mounts to the carburetor, and you have to buy the correct linkage parts that mount to the carburetor itself on the bell crank or whatever, the linkage. Edelbrock makes the stuff, Holley, everybody. You have to have the correct geometry. You can't just drill a hole, mount the cable, because that changes the geometry and changes the pull, changes the line pressure in the transmission, and if it's wrong, will kill your transmission. If it's just slightly off, it'll make it shift crappy. Now, there are YouTube videos and Google searches, you know, how to adjust the TV cable on one of these transmissions. When the torque converter locks, it eliminates any slippage in the torque converter or transmission. So basically what that does, it extends the life of your transmission. They make conversion kits where you can wire the lockup torque converter to a switch, you know, activate it when you want to. They also sell units to eliminate that function. Now, the early 700R4s were a little weak-kneed, as anything that, you know, in the first couple of years, so they kind of got a bad rap. that in addition to the TV cable adjustment that a lot of people didn't understand and still don't. They can be built to be very good transmissions, and don't be afraid of them. Now, I will tell you when this will not be a good transmission for you. This transmission, and like all the other GM transmissions for that part, it has like a 252, I think, first gear ratio, and the 400 is close. This transmission has the deepest first gear ratio of any of the GM transmissions that are automatics. This has a 306 or 308 first gear ratio. So what that means is, if you have a deep rear axle ratio, like 373 or numerically higher, like a 410 or a 456 or whatever, this is not going to be the transmission you want to go with. What's going to happen is you're going to go from first gear to second gear incredibly fast, like that. Like maybe so much that you don't even notice that it shifted gears. So your first gear is going to be useless, and you're going to be blowing the tires off of it, because the torque multiplication with the steep gear, first gear is useless in this transmission. So this is not the one you want to go with. You're going to either, if you got like a 456 gear, don't do this. Do a built turbo 350 400, 204R that doesn't have a real aggressive first gear. Now, in a car that has like a highway gear, this is a fantastic transmission, like a 256 or a 342 gear ratio. First gear will help a big car, especially like that one, will help you out of the hole and give you a much more aggressive takeoff. So if you got a highway gear, this is excellent. If you got a performance gear, this is not excellent. So that pretty much covers the major differences here. The line hookups are similar. That's really it. Even the output shaft is the same. So I always buy a brand new output shaft. We're going to be shortening the drive shaft, and part of that I'm just going to have them put a brand new yoke on it, because you get a seal groove. It can cause problems with ripping the seal as you drive, and it goes in and out, you know. But that pretty much covers that. It's a great transmission. Don't be afraid of it, but buy the right parts or you're going to kill it. All right, fellas, so I went ahead and stuck the transmission up here just to make sure that I wasn't dealing with any floor interference issues or anything. Torque converter's not in it, of course. And my main purpose was to make sure that my shifter here had room, and as I suspected, it doesn't. So I'm gonna have to just, trying to get it to focus, I'm gonna have to just notch this little section out. This is just some really thin tin that somebody stuck over what originally was a pretty large hole cut in the floor. So I can probably do this with tin snips or my Dremel tool. Basically, the shifter housing moves back a couple of inches in relation to where it was mounted on the Turbo 350. I've also slightly modified the shifter itself. So I know that mounted on the transmission, it works, goes through all the gears, the detents work properly. So I'm gonna go ahead and snip that little piece of metal out, and we'll be ready to stuff a transmission in it. I did also want to show you guys, without the transmission being here, that it does fit and doesn't hit this part of the floor. Now, somebody previously, I suspect this looks factory, but this, I'm not sure if somebody notched that at some point in time or bent it, but either way, the transmission does not hit there. So there's no fit issues there with the stock motor mounts or with the aftermarket Crossmember, which I'm going to show you here shortly. So there's no fit issues whatsoever with the floor pan, which is awesome. Again though, I'm not positive that all this floor pan is exactly where it was from the factory. It's got some floor pans put in it, kind of hucky pucked in there. Not my work, but it's functional and everything. Well, y'all ready to make this happen? Got the new torque converter in there. Like I said, measured. Got all 3 clicks. I know that's fully inserted and bottomed out. I've got the new dipstick tube, which this one is a flexible one. Owner is electing to just go ahead and run new rubber lines. So I put clean these, and I put a little flare on the end. If you happen to flare a line like this, you don't need a big flare, just enough so that the clamp won't blow off. So it's got to be flared enough that there's no way that the clamp would pop, but you cannot do what they had before and just cut it and stick it on there. I don't know how they didn't blow off anything with any kind of pressure on it. But and then deburr it, file the outside of it, flare it more than you need, and then Dremel tool it down a little bit, file it where it's nice and smooth so that your hose will fit over there and not cut it when you're trying to put it on there. Then we've got a low car TV cable set up, which we have to trim to fit, so it doesn't have the cable in it, and it does not have the O-rings or anything on it, because we'll be pulling this screw back out, this bolt, and cutting this end of it to fit whatever we need, if we need to. So that doesn't have anything in it, but other than that, we're strapped down, we're ready to go. So I'll set you up and we can stuff this thing back in the hole. Hopefully it's painless. All right, well, I got the transmission here. One thing I would also like to add is make sure your flex plate has the correct bolt pattern for your torque converter. This one is a dual pattern flex plate. Has the one that the Turbo 350 utilized here, and then a smaller pattern for this particular 700 R4 converter. I've already checked that it's right. So you don't want to slap this up there, bolt everything down, and then find out that your torque converter doesn't have the right bolt pattern. Sorry about that rooster over there video bombing me. He's not big enough to be out on his own all day long with the other guys, and he's got a big old mouth. His lungs haven't come to him yet, but he still likes to make noise. So you want to be real careful that you don't smash any lines or wires that are hanging on the back of the motor on your way up. I'm having to guide my dipstick tube up to where it needs to go carefully while I'm doing this, so going a little slow. I don't want to get it in a bind. Everything's looking great so far. Okay, I'm going to get my kick down cable routed in a good location. Alright. With an adjustable top on either your jack or your transmission jack stand like I have, I try to get them just perfectly flush where they'll just walk right onto the guide pins. I have spent a whole lot of Saturdays laying on my back in the driveway installing them like some of you fellas probably are. Probably gonna have to get in there and go ahead and route this kick down cable up high. Might be able to push it. Let me get my light. Just about got her up where she needs to be. Okay, that one's in. Now this, once you get a bolt started, now is when you want to try to confirm that your torque converter is not jammed into your flex plate. If your torque, at this point, if your torque converter is wedged into your flex plate, you don't have your torque converter inserted far enough into the transmission. And if you go ahead and monkey that thing down, you're going to end up breaking the oil pump. Okay, so now I'm just going to snug up this bolt just to pull it up snug against the engine block on both sides. And I'm not going to do it with a ratchet though. Get my ratchet wrench. face, that'd feel good. Okay. Grab my 9/16 wrench. Pretty challenging trying to stay out of the way of the cameras. If you've never done it before, tried to do any kind of video work, you don't understand what I'm talking about. It's hard to keep your big arms and your face and your back of your head out of the shot. I'm sure you people that have done the YouTube thing or whatever for a while are laughing at me. That's okay. It's Friday afternoon. Miserable weather outside. We're right in the middle of a heat wave here in Oklahoma. It's like 103 outside. Last night, I just got my new shop air conditioner online. So it's like 76, 77 in here right now, which is totally manageable. I'm gonna go ahead and drop the back of the transmission down, see if it'll tug the engine down a little. And I'll go ahead and put the rest of my bell housing bolts in and bring you back after I get the last couple of them in. Okay, so I'm gonna sneak you fellers up in here, maybe. Try to. Trying to get these new lines installed. Got 2 new hoses. Slip them over my little barb there that I made. Okay, a little hose clamp on it. Just go ahead and drop the other one. And we're back after dropping that one. Okay, see how I just got just a little raised lip on there that's also filed down, slips line right up on it easy. I'm gonna go ahead and snug these up and bring you back. All right, so off camera, I went up top and I cut the low car TV cable down to the correct length, pulled it back out, put the O-rings on it, put the cable in it, hooked it up over there, and so it's the right length. It's not hooked up top, but it's got its cable in it. I've got both of my rubber hoses on, they're snug. You're probably gonna have hard lines. I also bolted the back, I forgot to hit record, but I bolted these 2 bolts in that mount the shifter to the top of the transmission. If you use this style, you have to get longer top bolts. The low car kickdown or TV cable that I'm using is a part number KD-2700HT. So that works with, this one's going on a Edelbrock carburetor. It has its own linkage. This car has a low car braided stainless cable for the accelerator. Your cable may just be a plastic style sheathed stock type. Anyways, so I'm gonna go ahead and put this nut on here, get the shifter finished up. Then it'll basically be to the point of, remember, like I said, don't tighten this nut up unless you're holding that with something. I'm just gonna run it up where it's close to snug and then grab it with the vice grips. Channel locks, I mean. Just keep it. It doesn't need to be super tight. Okay. If you just go to cranking on it, you can break the detents and the stuff up there in the shifter, so you don't want to do that. This gives me all the range of movement that I need. 700 R4 transmission Crossmember. This is for obviously the 700 R4. It's the 59 to 64 X-frame GM cars. So it comes not painted, but I went ahead and painted it. So we're gonna jack the transmission up, pop that in there, put the bolts in. I don't think there's anything I'm forgetting above the transmission, so without further ado, let's shove that thing up. Just gonna kind of just push it to the floor. That should give me plenty of room. Got my bolts here, the washer. Pretty nice little units. It was I believe $209 shipped here, so from California. It's not too bad. Quite honestly, I don't really care that much what stuff costs, especially with, you know, customer car, as long as it works. I don't get irritated unless you spend big money for something and it doesn't work, or it looks terrible. But this is a nice piece. Give them a call, Bowtie Overdrives. They're not paying me to say that, but appears to be a good piece. There she goes. Not sure if it's the smaller bolts or the bigger bolts. It's the bigger ones. Okay. The other one. I always like it when aftermarket parts fit. Most of the time, especially with body and sheet metal parts, you never get anything that fits. They're terrible. Okay, so at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and take the weight off of the transmission jack completely. Just let it set on there. Not a bad looking Crossmember. Def already. Good enough. Good enough again. I'm not sure what size that is. Not this size. Couple of lemonade the other day. It was hot outside afternoon. I drive by a lawnmower supply place here in town, and there's two young guys, probably a 9 or 10-year-old and a probably 11 or 12-year-old, and they had a lemonade stand set up selling lemonade. So I gave them a $20 tip for each one of them. Like, that's impressive, you know, in today's world. Somebody that's trying to do something for themselves. Okay. It's gonna be, today's Friday, it's gonna be Monday or Tuesday potentially before I can get to the Driveshaft shop. The Ford unibody we're working on, I've got to get the motor mount situated on that thing. I'm going to get the Driveshaft made for it and this at the same time, since it's like a 30-45 minute drive for me one way. Let's see, try to rotate these. But that pretty much wraps up the mechanical portion of this, other than putting the torque converter bolts in, which I don't have. New torque converter didn't come with them. Since we're not doing a $700 R4 swap for a $700 R4, I don't have them. Turbo 350 units won't work. So I gotta go buy those. Before we can close that up, I gotta pull the vacuum line out, pull the old transmission cooler lines out, and then drive shaft. That's pretty much gonna wrap it up. You'll probably see some of that, but looks great. Well, what do you all say we put a drive shaft back in this car? Okay. It's 3 inches shorter on this end, so hopefully that'll make it a little more agreeable to going back in the hole there. I want to make sure you get your perch here, you know, where she's supposed to be. Okay, I got one of these bolts started on this little carrier assembly, which is difficult to get situated properly. Just going to run them in just enough that I can still slide it and it won't fall over as I'm moving back there to put the U-joint yoke together. peel the tape off, keep from losing my caps. And pull it down. Drop her in the hole. Got my top yoke. Okay, spinner. And put the nuts on. Might have room for my ratchet wrench. So this back U-joint on this back yoke felt funny even though it was brand new. Like it was clunky. And the Driveshaft shop, they put a new one in it, and the new one was just like that. Well, figured out this yoke was smashed. Probably somebody installing it or pushing one out or whatever wrong. Whatever the cause, the rear yoke was tweaked. So it's got a new rear yoke, got a new front yoke, been balanced and shortened. So, okay, let's tighten these up real quick. Well, fellas, we're just about wrapped up under here. I got my correct torque converter bolts. Still have to put the dust cover on. I've got my shifter linkage all set up where we're hitting all the gears at the right time. I did have to make a minor modification to the park brake cable assembly, all this linkage here. I had to shorten this rod by 1 inch, and I had to bend the end of this tab because the drive shaft yoke was whacking it. The aftermarket support has come up with several solutions for this problem of getting a torque converter clutch to work. The simplest, which is what we're doing here, is basically through this 4-prong plug here to just supply voltage directly to the torque converter clutch and run it through a dash mounted switch, like just a little toggle switch. What that does is gives the driver full control over when the torque converter clutch is engaged and when it's not. For example, if you're going down the highway and you're going to be going for a 100-mile road trip, just flip the switch. It mechanically locks the two units together. You eliminate all your hydraulic slippage, and you get marginally better fuel mileage, and it kicks the RPM around a little bit. It's worthwhile to do. What you cannot do though is leave your torque converter clutch switch engaged when you come to a stop, because that'll kill the engine. Just like with a manual transmission car, if you pulled up to a light and didn't take it out of gear and didn't put your clutch in, it has the same effect. So what a lot of people do is run your power feed for your torque converter clutch through a brake pedal switch, so that anytime your brake pedal is pushed, it'll disconnect power to your torque converter clutch and disconnect it. There's also systems that use a simple pressure switch, like this one here I've got here in my pocket. Just a little 2-prong, basically on-off switch, and those tap into like the 4th gear servo, basically your 4th gear line pressure. And when it senses pressure at the correct amount, it'll engage the torque converter clutch, and that makes it automatic. That's the ideal way to do it. You can also power the torque converter clutch through a vacuum switch on your carburetor linkage, so that it'll only operate at a certain power setting. But right now, I bought a kit that does have the pressure switch, but this transmission does not have the port for it on the side. So what you can do is remove the servo cover here on this side of the transmission, drill it and tap it. But I didn't build this transmission, a local guy did. So I'm not gonna, crack that thing open and do any drilling and tapping, because if there's any problem with the transmission, I don't want to get blamed for it. So I'm just gonna wire it up simple, a dead man switch right through the a switch on the dash. And when this thing goes to the transmission guy when it leaves my shop, and he gets the perfect adjustment on the TV cable, if he wants to drop the back of this transmission down and install this in the servo cover, he's more than welcome to do so. Hey dudes, I've got you zoomed in quite a bit, so hopefully you don't lose all the resolutions, not be able to see what we're doing here. This car already had this low car bracketry for this Edelbrock, and it was utilizing the Turbo 350 for this setup, but it's the same one for the 700 R4 as far as the hole placement, with these nice braided stainless low car cables. I do prefer the low car stuff because usually it's adaptable as far as cable lengths to a variety of different vehicles. It's just cut to length. So I've got the cable that comes up from the transmission with the little collar on it. I've got it stuffed into the back of my guide through here, and I have my cable strung out here. So basically with a just like any other kickdown or TV cable setup, pull that. So these kits come with this little plastic piece that hooks onto this little adapter that comes with the kit. It screws into the bottom linkage of your Edelbrock carburetor. So we put that on first. This is super simple. Put that little feather on there. That just snaps right down onto the linkage at the bottom of the carburetor. You're not going to be able to see what I'm doing real good, but I'll give you a close-up when I get done. Okay? So that allows the carburetor to do this setup there. Then comes this little barrel jam nut assembly. Got a little Allen screw. The kit even comes with a little Allen wrench. You slide that over. And basically, referring back to the adjustment of the TV cable, this is where I recommend you either get advice from a transmission shop or a trusted source on YouTube that doesn't want to be liable for ruining your transmission like me. But essentially what you want is at full throttle, you want this cable to be fully extended. Is basically what you want. So that's as far as I'm going to get into that. But what you do is when the carburetor's full throttle, this cable is pulled all the way out, you just tighten that jam nut where it's right up against this plastic piece we just installed. So that's all there is to that, and then just cut off your extra. I usually leave a couple extra inches just in case you have to reroute the cable or whatever. You're better off not being too short, is what I'm trying to say. This pretty much wraps up the major part of this install. We still got to go over there and install the new cooler lines after I flush the radiator itself. We got new hoses. I have to run our wire into the interior for the torque converter clutch and put fluid in it, and that's going to wrap that up. So I guess we'll check back in a few minutes if y'all are still awake. Hopefully y'all are awake. Y'all said you like to see all the nitty-gritty details, so here they are. Alrighty, here's the finished installation of the accelerator pedal and TV cable. It's your TV cable, that's your accelerator cable, that's your linkage with your adjustable deal. So when you go full throttle, it pulls the TV cable. Simple. Well, I guess you know what that means. Time to find careful. There's usually 3 or 4 wrecks here a year, some of them pretty bad. Road pulls out on the left and the right, right here. People run up down the road 80 miles an hour. Dangerous. Looks like that's going to put a wrap on the 700R4 swap. It's going to be a real good deal for this car. So if you're thinking about doing the same thing, especially on a full-size GM with this vintage, kind of have a pretty good idea of what's going to be required. I got the TV shift cable points pretty much where they need to be. It's not shifting late, it's not shifting too early, it's not shifting too hard. So I think we're pretty much dialed in, but like I said, I'm going to have them take it to the shop anyways, just because I always recommend that whoever built the transmission set the pressure to where they need to be. But as always, please like, share, subscribe. It's what keeps the wheels on the bus. Have a good one.